So hello, class. How is everybody? I hope that at the time that you see this video that things are okay. I know that everybody's sort of figuring out new normal, new life, all that kind of stuff with the coronavirus, uh, how it's affecting different people in different ways. Just know that I'm here at any point. You can email me. You can set up a meeting with me via Zoom conference. That's how I'm recording this video. We can connect in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I'm here for you, here to support you in any way that I can, here to help you out any way that I can. Like I said in the beginning, my goal is that everybody does well. I don't want anybody to fail. I don't think anybody will fail, but under the circumstances, we'll do the best that we can with the situation that we have presented with us. All right, so now let's continue on chapter 13. Just a quick housekeeping. If you got the email, so lecture will be online, videos as you see now. Quiz 2, quiz 3, quiz 3, quiz 4 will be on Canvas. I changed the dates on those. The final will also be on Canvas. I have to make the final, which I will make now because it's not going to be the departmental final any longer. We'll see if I can figure out another grade for you guys since we're going to be missing the lab final. I will send some videos for labs and some information so that you get the knowledge that we were going to get in lab, because we were supposed to do the dissection of the eye, for instance. So some of the things that we missed, I'm going to try to see if I can get some of the things that we're going to miss. I want to try to see if I can get something to you. All right, so this video right now is the first section of chapter 13, the peripheral nervous system. Hopefully you got the email that summed up the end of chapter 12, and now we're moving forward with chapter 13. All right, so this is an overview of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so remember the peripheral nervous system. Remember we have the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Brain and then the spinal cord down the back. That's your central nervous system. And then everything else is basically your peripheral nervous system. So your peripheral nervous system connects your central nervous system to your external environment, to your world, right? So that's very important to remember. I got this cup from Africa. So it has I don't know if you can see it, but it has animals on it and stuff. So that's really cool. I love this mug. It's really cool. Anyways. We know that the peripheral nervous system connects our central nervous system to our environment, to our worlds around us, sending sensory information towards the central nervous system, and then the central nervous system just sends the motor information through the peripheral nervous system to be able to act on our bodies, visceral, somatic, etc. Central nervous system does the processing and outputs through the peripheral nervous system, okay? All right, remember these different divisions. We talked about this in chapter 11, so you can go through chapter 11 or, to review it some more. All right, so we have sensory division, sensory afferent. Remember the afferent and the efferent, afferent, sensory, efferent, motor, right? Sensory division, which is that detect and transmit sensory. Remember sensory going towards the central nervous system, right? I touch this computer and the sensation goes through the nerves in my finger to my spinal cord to my brain, and it tells me the computer is hard, the computer is warm, for instance, right? So sensory nervous system, the sensory division of the peripheral nervous system, that can be further divided into your somatic sensory division. Detects both internal, external stimuli, your skin, your special sensory receptors, your special sense organs. Remember your ears, your sense of smell, sense of taste, special sense organs. Then you also have visceral sensory division. That's going to be relays internal information from your organs, to your brain. So for instance, your blood pressure, that's a good example. Heart rate, things like that. Or your organs are sending information sort of automatically to the central nervous system, which it can then control automatically, autonomically, okay, which we'll talk about. Motor division, efferent, remember afferent sensory, efferent motor, you know, those two terms, carries out the motor functions of the nervous system. Subdivisions based on organs that the neurons contact, right? So now that sensory sends information towards the CNS sends information back through our motor division to tell our body what to do, right? We have the somatic motor division, voluntary motor function. Hopefully this is, you remember that. Just think of, you know, picking up my cup, you know, voluntary motor function. My brain thinks, sends a signal through my spinal cord, out through my peripheral nervous system, to my muscles in my arm, to pick up my cup, put it to my mouth. You know, so somatic. Visceral motor division, that's your autonomic, which I was just talking about. You don't think for your heart to beat, for instance. You don't think for your stomach to digest food. It's visceral motor division or autonomic. When you see the autonomic, think of automatic, okay? And then you can further divide the autonomic nervous system, so the autonomic motor nervous system, known as the ANS. You can further divide that into sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic, right? So you've heard of this fight or flight. Like when the first time you heard of Corona, you were like, oh my gosh, let me run to the grocery store and get all the toilet paper. Fight or flight. Or, or you can, the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. That's the autonomic motor nervous system that's working when you're resting and digesting. So for instance, when you get to the digestive system, which is chapter 22 in part 2 of this class, which I hope you all take, digestion is like, it's really a 4-hour process. You eat food, it takes about 4 hours for your body to break down that food, digest it, break it apart, and then absorb it into your bloodstream. It's about a 4-hour process. That's, you know, rest and digest, that's when you're parasympathetic. You know, you don't need to, obviously it's all happening autonomically. You chew the food, but after that, it's all controlled autonomically once it goes down your pharynx and your esophagus and to your stomach, small intestines and large intestines. It's all autonomic. But that's like the slower things that are happening, rest and digest. The sympathetic nervous system is sort of like the faster things, like that. I need something to happen right now. Physical work, visceral responses, emotions, excitement, that's more your sympathetic nervous system. If you go hop on a treadmill, that's more your sympathetic nervous system at play. Yes, you're using your somatic, you know, to actually run, but, you know, your sympathetic saying, you know, heartbeat faster, lungs, you know, diaphragm move quicker so that we can inhale more oxygen. So that's your sympathetic nervous system at work viscerally, okay? This is a nice diagram, just putting all those together. You should look at that when you print out these slides or when you're looking at these slides on your computer. Just different ways we break down the peripheral nervous system. So we have peripheral afferent, which is somatic and visceral. Then we have peripheral efferent, your motor, which is somatic and visceral. And then the visceral motor, we break down in sympathetic and parasympathetic. So many different divisions at play. Just how we divide up the nervous system, okay? Your peripheral nerves, and this term ganglia we're going to see. You're going to see this plenty of times in this chapter, so get used to it. Peripheral nerves are the main organs of the peripheral nervous system, right? So your central nervous system, the brain, spinal cord, right? Peripheral nervous system are your peripheral nerves. You have your spinal nerves, and then all the nerves off the spinal cord. And you have your cranial nerves, the nerves that are from go off the brain, basically don't go through the spinal cord. But all those nerves are the organs of the peripheral nervous system. What's an organ? Come on, somebody raise your hand. An organ, multiple tissues working together to perform a specific function. Remember that? Okay. Right, so peripheral nerves, main organs of the PNS, right? Axons of the many neurons bound together by connective tissue. So you have connective tissue, you have nervous tissue, multiple tissues working together for a specific function that makes it an organ, okay? So the nerves of the PNS innervate the majority of the structures in the body. Innervate just means they send a signal to, right? So you have mixed nerves, which contain both motor and sensory functions, right? So, and then you have sensory nerves, which contain only sensory, whereas motor nerves contain mostly motor, right? So we know we've seen that in the cranial nerves. Olfactory only senses your olfactory, your sense of smell. You only have a sense there. It doesn't actually move anything. So it's a sensory nerve versus the hypoglossal, which can move things. So it has motor functions as well. Right now, your spinal nerves. Right. So remember, there's cranial nerves. Remember we talked about those, and then there's also these spinal nerves. Right, your spinal nerves originate from your spinal cord. That's why we call them spinal nerves. That's a good way to remember it. Cranial nerves don't go through the spinal cord. That's a good way to remember it. Spinal nerves originate from spinal cord, innervate structures below the head and neck. Right, spinal cord. Think of your spinal cord. From your brain stem. Remember that. Remember the brain. Cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, brainstem. From the brainstem, it's basically continuous with the spinal cord, goes all the way down to the back, right? We talked about that structure, right? So, and then you see the nerves of the spinal cord sort of going downwards, right? So if I injure my spinal cord here, everything below it would be paralyzed, okay? So think of the structure of the spinal cord when we're as we're talking about these spinal nerves, okay? So remember, we have the anterior root, posterior root. When you're looking at the spinal cord, anterior root, motor neurons, anterior towards the front. So you have the nerves that come off towards the front. That the part of the nerve that comes off to the front of towards the front of the spinal cord. Anterior root, that's mostly the motor. Posterior root comes off the back of the spinal cord, is mostly the sensory. All right, so remember that, because that's going to be very important. So two collections of axons can connect the PNS with the spinal cord's gray matter. Remember, the spinal cord is white matter on the outside, gray matter on the inside. Looks like a little butterfly if you take a transverse cut of it. So hopefully these things, I know it's been a little while since we've been in class, but hopefully these things ring a bell. But if not, just go back and review chapter 11. Right. So you have a posterior root ganglion. All right. So this is this term ganglion. It's a swollen area in the posterior root where you house the cell bodies of sensory neurons. Remember a neuron, structure of a neuron? Dendrite, cell body, axon. Right? Those cell bodies have to be housed somewhere, and then you have like this long axon. That's what we, in bundles of axons, that's what we actually call nerves, right? So when you say somebody got on my nerves, what you're really saying is they got on my bundle of axons, but that doesn't sound as cool. So I'm silly. It's actually 9:30 at night right now because my kids are sleeping, and this is when I can get quiet time to be able to record these videos. All right, so forgive me if I'm a little delirious at times, but it's all good. Okay, so you have this swollen area, posterior root ganglion, posterior towards the back, ganglion, swollen area where you have the cell bodies. And then from that, you have the axons extending. right? Posterior and anterior roots fuse to form the spinal nerve, just lateral to the posterior root ganglion. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. 31 pairs of spinal, all 31 pairs of spinal nerves are mixed nerves, right? Mixed meaning sensory and motor, right? So all 31 pairs, all right? So a pair is 2, right? So it's 31 off your spinal cord, 31 pairs, all right? So like 62 sets of nerves, but 31 pairs are mixed. So they have sensory, they have motor and sensory combined, okay? And that's what it looks like. So you have, this is just a cross section of your spinal cord. See that gray matter? That's your anterior horn towards the front, your posterior horn towards the back, right? You have the anterior root, posterior root of the spinal nerve, right? This is the posterior root ganglion. So this is where your soma cell bodies of the nerves of the different neurons are housed, right? So that makes sense. And then so you have multiple cells here, multiple neurons, a bunch of neurons, bunch of cell bodies housed here, and then their axons extend here. They're bound to the bundles of different of axons are bound together, and that's what makes the actual, what we call the nerve, right? So, and that's showing you here that would be an axon of one neuron. So it's a whole bundle of axons. So it's multiple nerves in multiple axons, multiple nerve cells that are in one spinal nerve. Remember, there's 31 pairs of these. So there's one off of this side, and then there's one off the other side, not shown here, but there'll be one off the other side. So that's one pair. And then there's 31 of these coming down the spinal cord, right? Structures associated with spinal nerves, right? Just talking about the structure. And notice I didn't put this in red just because I think it's good to know, but not necessarily something I'm going to test you on. So you have an epineurium, outermost layer of connective tissue, holds motor and sensory axons together. Remember, so anterior root, I didn't say that. Anterior is the motor, posterior root is the sensory, cell bodies here, and then you combine to make what we call a nerve, right? So multiple axons combined. So make sure I just want to make sure I pointed that out. So when you look at the actual nerve, which is a bunch of neurons, bunch of axons of a bunch of neurons sort of bound together, the outermost layer is a connective tissue. So remember, nerves are an organ. So they have nervous tissue, connective tissue. You have what they call fascicles, small groups of bundles of axons surrounded by connective tissue. Perineurium, and then each individual axon within the fascicle is surrounded by its own connective tissue, endoneurium. So basically it's nervous tissue and connective tissue. And the cranial nerves, which attach to the brain, and they innervate structures above the head, above the shoulders, basically. The cranial nerves are a little different than your spinal nerves, and the difference is they're not formed by fusion of sensory and motor roots, like the spinal nerves are. Allow for, cranial nerves, you can have purely sensory, you can have some that are mixed, and you can have some that are motor, mostly motor, okay? So cranial nerves are different, and they don't come off the spinal cord, they connect directly to the brain, all right? So they may be sensory, they may be mixed, or they may be motor, right? So their structure is a little bit different, whereas all of the spinal nerves are mixed. They're all sensory and motor. So good point to recognize. And that's just showing you the structure of spinal nerves. Epineurium around the outside, perineurium around different groups of axons, and then the individual axons are surrounded by endoneurium. Notice you have blood vessels. Every part of your body needs blood, including your nerves, including your bundles of axons. Okay. See that term, myelinated axon of one neuron? Remember myelination, very important as far as sending signals faster. You have unmyelinated axons as well. That's the end of section 1.